the absolute basics of what the structure of a basic portrait would mean. As usual, I like to point out, if you haven't seen me do this before, your grip. So I really emphasize the proper grip for drawing, and hopefully have you test it out. I know if you're not familiar with it, it will feel awkward. So here's the whole point. As an instrument, you're supposed to hold it for the most efficient use of the instrument. So if this was a hammer, we would hold it like this in order to get the best out of the design of a hammer. It's a pencil, so we can hold it in several ways. Most of the time, it would be this way. And this would be the grip for writing. So if you're still drawing with a writing grip, you're missing out. What I want you to do is place your pencil on your index finger, between your thumb, and you could actually just draw like that. Now you can use one or two more fingers to hold that to give you just a little more control. And the next thing would be you can hold it longer. So the longer you hold that pencil with this grip, which is the under or overhand grip, as long as you have it between your index and your thumb, and some variation of that grip, not this one, even if you're holding it longer, but with the writing grip, what you're missing out is in the range of motion. So drawing from your shoulder, using your shoulder, elbow, and sometimes your wrist. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to try to draw an egg. And I'm going to use the entire page to draw an egg. How would I draw an egg? So as you can see, the motion of my arm is ghosting the shape that I'm about to draw. It's also ghosting the size. I could go small or I could go really large. And before I touch the pencil down to the paper, you could see, I could kind of visualize what that's going to look like. So as I begin to see it, I'm going to touch the pencil really slowly and lightly. And you can begin to see it appear. You see the shape appearing. And as it appears, I get a little more control and I go over with a little more precision over some of these lines. Now notice that it's really light. And I'm going to stop there. So just closing it up so you can see that it's there. And you want to do this lightly. You don't want to go too dark too fast because then it gets a little messy. So when I have this size of a circle, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to, as I'm ghosting the circle and getting a little darker, I'm going to extend it. See what I did there? Where at the top it's a little wider and at the bottom it becomes somewhat of an ellipse. And now you could see it there. Once I have a shape that I could begin to see on the paper just a little clearer, well then I could add a little bit of pressure, squeezing the pencil or slowing down the pace and make that line a little bit darker. Now this is the key for you to really enjoy your drawing, to push yourself to, just like any sport, you want to have the techniques and the right foundations in order to go further faster. And that's what we're looking for here. And there's a simple egg. So I just did an egg, no matter how big it is. What I want you to do next is, I'm going to use my fingers here, or my pencil, and I'm going to try to eyeballing it, draw a line right through the middle. Now, if this is the top, and this is the bottom, where would that middle be? Now, I'm not thinking about portrait yet. I'm just thinking about splitting this egg in the middle. And that's where I see the middle. Now, I could check that by placing the tip of the pencil right at the line that I just drew, and then my index finger right here at the bottom. And I bring that measurement, we've all done this before, and I'm going to put that at the top. And wow, look at that. I came pretty close. That's right in the middle. So there we have it. An egg divided by a line right through the middle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to also draw a vertical line right through the middle as well. Notice the grip. Here's usually when you shift direction of line, here's where that grip, we forget and go right back to what we're used to. having to use just our fingers. Now, if you get to see what's happening here, I have what's called the axis and the eye line. Follow along with me. We have center line, eye line. If I take this bottom half and I split it in half again, I'm going to have what would be the nose line, or the bottom of the nose. And if I split this into thirds, this bottom quarter, if I split it into 3 equal, right about there, segments, what I easily come up with is going to be this. So notice that I could just do another circle. And I'm doing this really rapidly as a sketch warm-up kind of exercise. So you can begin to see how all of this easily, just adding a little bit of extra charcoal, extra graphite here, can easily bring about, and you begin to see what's happening. So these would be the general measurements that we're going to work with. But the most important thing that I want you to get comfortable with is drawing an egg shape and then finding the eye line and the center line. So follow me with this exercise that we're about to do here. Today, our portrait, we're going to try to draw a quick sketch of this image that you see on screen. And then we're going to take that to our portrait exercise, which you see here. But first, I want you to look at this portrait by John Singer Sargent. I'm going to flip this over. Now, you could do 2 or 3 or 4 per page. Let me try 4 on this side of the paper. First thing, I want to look at my subject now. So I'm looking at my subject, at my model, and I want to, number 1, get the size of that egg. So first I could do the circle, ghost it, and then come to the egg. Now you could do this loosely. It does not have to be a perfect egg. All I want you to do here is these very quick 30-second, 1 minute. We're not doing the whole portrait, but guess what we're doing? We're going to try to get the shape of the egg, which would be our head, or the general foundation, the general basic shape. So there it is. Now, is that a perfect egg? Not really. And because of the model and the pose, what I want to find is a couple of things. And I want you to do it before I do. I want you to find, where is the center line? Because this portrait is looking at us straight forward, that center line is right down the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that there. And the next thing is I'm going to find the eye line. So remember what we did earlier? We found the length, and then really trusting that you follow this rule, do it right in the middle. The tendency is to go higher. We always think that the eye line is higher, and we put it generally above, a little bit higher where it's supposed to go. And from here, I'm going to split. You don't have to do the entire line, but you could just do, remember, half, and then half of this, and then you could do a third. And what does this third do? It gives me the location of the lips. If you want to take that just a little bit further, we could do that right there. And there's my pose. If you want to go just even a little bit further, I could add a little neck to it. And a little bit of hairline. There we go. That's as far as I want you to go. I'm going to show you the next one. And we're going to do the same thing. Oh, this is by Picasso. So notice that the egg has a little bit of a tilt. What do I mean by a tilt? It's not sitting straight up. It kind of has not just a turn, but a tilt. So we're going to find that axis first. Same thing. I'm going to draw my circle. Try to get the size of it. And because I don't want it to be straight down, I want to find that line. I could do the line first, somewhat in this direction. And that gives me the bottom side of my egg. And from there, I could visualize it easier. And remember, we're just trying to draw eggs here. The better you get at drawing egg shapes, the better your portraits and the easier you're going to figure them out. So would you agree? Do you see something like that in here? Okay, so next thing would be, where's that center line? So the center line, think of it, a line that goes right down the middle of the eyebrows, right through the center of the eyebrows, right down the middle of the nose, right through the middle of the mouth, right down through the chin. So the more you begin to curve this, and you could start very lightly, the more you create the illusion of volume. So it shouldn't be just a straight line. It should curve, giving you just a hint of what the volume is doing. Otherwise, it will look a little bit flat. And the same goes for the eye line. So remember, we know it's halfway. So let's visualize that. Halfway should be right about here. Don't fall for that going a little bit higher. And it should be right here. So I'm going to curve it just a little bit as well. And if we do that, and we begin to trust this very easy, very simple principle, I could find the halfway at the bottom, and then that third. And guess what I have now? So notice that the edge of my nose goes here. I have a little mouth going on here. And once again, I have the beginning of a portrait. If I wanted to, I add a little neck. There we have it. Let's go to the next one. They get trickier and trickier. One more. We're going to go to think. And now, the key is, where's that egg? Do I even see it? So the trick is to look past hair and all the other stuff that's trying to distract you and see the absolute basic shape. So here it is. I also see a little bit of a tilt along with the turn, and it's kind of similar to this one, but it's actually a little straighter. So start with my circle. Try to get the sense of my size, the little portrait that I'm about to do. And I'm going to find that you can actually place your pencil right in front of your eye and use this method of sightseeing. So you can actually place the pencil right over the center line and bring it over to your paper. And that's what I'm looking for here, the tilt. And once I see that tilt, then I'm going to visualize the egg. And notice that I'm going for this point right there where I saw the center line coming together for my axis. So there's my egg. My center line, I could see it here. Now, one key is looking at the tip of the nose. The tip of the nose is not going over the edge or the side of the face here. It ends somewhere over here. So if I put that somewhere in the middle, how do I figure that line out? That's the skill that we're trying to develop here. So notice that I'm adding a little bit of a curve to it. And from here, I know this is a little bit distracting, that circle that I'm ghosting right at the beginning. That's not my halfway. Now, here's the trick. Is this one looking a little bit down or is it looking a little bit up? It's almost looking straight forward at us. But is the eye line horizontal or is it tilting a little bit this way? Is it tilting a little bit this way? So what I see is it's actually tilting a little bit this way. How can you see that? Do you see that one eye is higher than the other, or it looks to be higher than the other? So it would follow this direction. And once again, finding the middle. Gotta trust it. And then find the angle for that eye line that seems to go from high to low. I'm going to find the middle of this bottom and then those thirds. And very easily, we could begin to design our portrait. And little by little, trusting this We could add a little bit of that hairline. And why not that neck? Very simple. Not much to it. Obviously, there's a little more chin here. And we could deal with that later, so the neck line would be actually a little further inside. Somewhere right there. One more. This one's too easy. Oh, this one. Well, I actually see the egg. And I picked drawings, not pictures, so you could see it easier, how all these artists came and put this together. So we're going to do two more, two quick ones. So I'm going to squeeze them both in this page. Here's my circle. Make it a little bit smaller. Now, another thing what you want to do when you look at portraits, I mentioned the word volume. You want to see them three-dimensionally. One good way is to think of a cube. So you can put a ball inside a cube. And it's easier sometimes to see the cube because the cube, you could see the sides. You could see the top. You know what's the front, the sides, and the bottom. So you put that sphere or the ball inside the cube, and it's easier for you to tell what's the front, what's the top, or what are the sides of the ball if you visualize it as a cube. So there's my egg. Now, notice that I see a lot of the top side of this. So let me go ahead and find that center line. And there's a tiny little bit of turn. So there's key words: the turn, the tilt, the axis, right down the middle. And here's a tricky thing that we haven't done before. Because I'm looking at it from above, and because it's looking downward, the measurement actually gets smaller. So the eye line, when it's below my eye line, and this may be tricky, it's not in the center anymore. It gets smaller. And if the portrait is higher than me, then the higher part, the upper part, gets smaller. So if you were to measure this and you put it right in the middle, that would be a little bit off. We're going to take it just a couple degrees down, and notice that curve. I'm going to add a lot of curve to this one just to give it that extra volume there. And notice that the line at the bottom, now dividing this into half, I actually have to push it down just a little bit more. And that's a touch, a millimeter. And we see where the nose and the mouth will line up. So notice how the nose now goes over that first third, which would be the mouth. And the tip of the nose, that would be there. And we don't even see the eyes here. So this could even be a little bit lower. But you could see how there's the structure and there's the beginning for this specific pose, this specific portrait. Okay, so we got that one. One last one. And I'm doing this on purpose to see if you could figure it out. Here it goes. So I'm looking for egg. I'm looking for, is there an axis, a tilt to the egg? How am I getting this egg? And where's that center line? How am I going to draw the center line or the eye line? I'll give you a few minutes to see how you do. So because this becomes a profile, we deal with it just a little bit different. So here's my egg. Straightforward, simple. And this is just a little bit of a different technique. This egg, which usually I'm using for the face, just a little bit more on the side for the cranium, meaning the actual head, not the face. Here I'm using this egg, which you'll see in a second, plus a second egg here. And just a little bit of extra volume at the back. And that would be my cranium. So 2 eggs. Can you see them there? Overlapping. would actually give me a profile. Now, obviously, all these lines here in the middle are not supposed to be there. I'm supposed to make them lighter. And because it's a profile, well, we don't see the other eye. So the line goes right at the edge. That's your profile. There are times where we see a little tiny bit of eye, so that's the beginning of a center line. But like everything else, we look for top, bottom, halfway, halfway. There's my eye line. Now this eye line looks like it's looking just upwards a little bit. I'm going to divide that in half. That's my nose line. And then the thirds, which would give me my lips. Or the mouth area. And from here, I'm going to add one line to show you where this would go. It would go somewhere like this. The area of the eye and the area of the lip. But you could begin to see how the portrait comes together. And a little bit of neck. And yes, we work these. This is stage 1 of developing your portraits. Now, my tip is always working with very light lines and developing this stage extremely light so you can work a little bit darker as you begin to stage 2, stage 3, and let the portrait come alive. So there's a quick warm-up, and now we're going to go to our first exercise. So the first exercise I want you to work with here is this. It's the same thing. Very loose. I want you to model this, and we're going to do it very quick. We're going to try to do this very loose. Really cannot mention this enough. Practice the grip. The overhand grip, the looseness of the grip, and getting used to using the full range of motion. Okay, so I'm going to make this full page. Do you see the egg here? So I'm going to make this that big. What I'm looking for here is a lot of curves, a lot of circles. And what I'm trying to do is deconstruct the pieces of a portrait in order to piece them together from simple to more complex, from basic to more complex, from biggest to smallest, by going biggest to smallest, and that means shapes, from simplest to more and more complex until the most complex, and from lightest, notice how light I'm here, to darker, darkest. So there's my circle. This is for the size. And then I'm going to develop this into the egg. So very slow. I ghost it. I begin to see it. I'm thinking of that axis, the line. So if you're not using this grip, you may be struggling a little bit because I'm literally throwing these lines. I'm drawing these lines from my shoulder. Now, one more thing. If you're also struggling, hey, I'm using the grip and I'm still struggling, maybe it's your posture. I haven't mentioned that I'm sitting at a 45 degree. So if you're working flat, sometimes you should stand up. That way you can actually have that right posture in order to use this grip and get the most out of it. So the first thing, stage 1, is the egg right there. Next thing I want to do is find that axis, the axis line, which would be, you could begin to see it right through here. So it's not right through the middle, but it's looking to my left. And depending on the size of the curve, see, I could continue this and make it another circle, but I just want to make sure it goes from here to here, not make it too extreme, too distracting. And I don't want to give this center line tilt. I want to make it, you see how it's straight up and down, but I'm adding the curve so I could get the pose. Next, I'm going to look for the eye line. So measuring, getting a sense of the middle, and you have to trust this. Middle, and notice the curve. So the curve, is it looking upwards or downwards? And there's a very easy way to use an upward curved line or a downward curved line. And you can see here how these two lines, this one would hint at it's looking neutral to up. And if I were to do it downwards, it would be looking down, like that previous portrait we did. So I trust that measurement, yep, it's right there in the middle. And you should check it. You should check it, because even if you think you got the middle, sometimes this is off and you are, oops, it's a little bit smaller at the top, larger at the bottom. No, you want this to be measured right there and just bring that over right there. And the best way to do it really is with your finger and pencil right here and then right there. So I may be a little bit higher too. And that is the tendency, to put this line just higher. Okay, so what I want you to begin to see here are the modelings to use simpler and circular shapes to develop the portrait. So one big one is going to be, let's find the middle of the bottom first. Just give us another line for measurement, and that would be the bottom of our nose right here. You see it. It's going to be right there. And then the bottom thirds, I could just very lightly hint at them so it doesn't get too confusing. Now that's where my mouth is going to be, right there, or the upper lip. Now these are not exact. This is just a guide to help you set up your portrait, but every face has tiny differences here and there. It all comes down to the measurements. So now that I have this going, and you could begin to see, oh yeah, this is developing into a portrait. I'm going to come over here to the side. And notice that I mentioned that cube. So we have the front of the face. Can you see the side of it? So here comes a really important one. I'm going to measure the front of the face, and I'm going to make a mark right about here, which would be right at the edge of the ocular. You actually can feel the bone right at the bottom of your eyebrow, right where it ends. You could touch the ocular cavity and the edge of that bone. And I'm going to take this and make an oval that is going to create the illusion of a lateral edge to this shape. You could see it there, and obviously that would happen on the other side as well, but we don't see it. So there it is. And now you see that this egg became front, and then this is the side. And we could almost begin to see the back too. Just a little bit. There it is. From here, I want you to measure right above the eye line, and there's going to be somewhat of an eyebrow line right there. And it's also curving downwards. You could see it here in the example. And I might have done this a little bit too big. So it's always a measurement where you set some things up first. Before you go too far, you want to make sure you have the right measurements. So those lines don't confuse you. You don't want to put too many lines that in the end are going to confuse you more. Here what I want to do is take this one right at the edge of that line and coming up, almost touching, but not really. Just at the edge of it. And then before the top of the head, it becomes my forehead basically. So here's one. And it could be a circle. It could be more of a rounded edge or rounded corner kind of square shape. But you begin to get the sensation of, okay, front, top, side, and here we go. I'm going to go ahead and take this straight to the bottom, and I'm going to go from the edge of this line right towards the front and add that curve that is going to begin to really add one of the first and biggest likeness to our portrait, which is the jawline. And it comes right to about this area here, It flattens out, and I'm going to add a circle here. Now you want this circle to sort of have an angle, which should be kind of turning away, just like our egg. So it's not a straightforward circle. And this is going to be our chin here. There it is. There's going to be just a little area, and you can actually see it as a square, but you could do all of it as ovals or circles. So I'm going to use mine as an oval. And this is that section between the chin and the lower lip. Right at the bottom of it. And you see how that lip just comes together. And I'm just going to harden this line just a little bit. I don't want to draw this portrait. I just want to take it step by step to develop it little by little. And I'm going to add just another semicircle here and another semicircle at the bottom for the lower lip. I know you see this one that comes right around the mouth, and that would be the muscles of the mouth. And that actually really is helpful when you're developing the expression of the mouth, to see those muscles and to see how they come in and connect with the cheek, with the chin. There it is. We're avoiding this area because it's very specific, but we're working our way up. Now I'm going to add one here. And there's one line that I need to put in now. And it should be this eye line that brings me straight across, which would be the top of my ear. So somewhere about here, and you notice that it almost touches the corner of the mouth. And it really emphasizes that side of the face, which will become that cheekbone. And this is what really works the lighting of your portrait. This is one of those lines that we absolutely have to see. It's either this one and this one that I will emphasize later. And there you have it. So from here, I think we have enough. We go to the bottom of the nose. And you can do this, although you see how it's not circular, it's more of a square. We take that forward. And what you want to do is just simplify it. Try to give the bottom, think of it as a cube. Just give it that bottom side, which happens just like this. And what's easier to give it a bottom side? Well, when you give it the top side. So make sure you take it right to that eye line before you curve it. So here we're dealing not with circular. You could, or big ovals, but it's a little more rectangular. I'm going to give it another line, which gives me now not the bottom, but the top or the front. And it also curves right into that eyebrow line. And the side. Notice where the side comes from. So it comes from circular motion here that then connects to that side. And from here, we also have another line, which sometimes it would curve this way. Here we're just adding that area where the side of the nose or the wings of the nose here connect with the side of the cheek into the cheekbone. And there we have it. Right there, we just connect. And we're adding sort of the ocular cavity. Let me go to this side once again. And then the other ocular cavity. Obviously, we're missing small little areas of detail like this top curve, which then becomes the edge and that rounding of the forehead. And here, that rounding of cheekbone that connects with this circular line we added earlier. And that's it. This is one of the best ways for you to really develop an understanding. I'm going to add that some of these lines to hint, insinuate a cylinder for the neck. And you can also go here. So the line that is at the bottom of the nose, so that half, and at the top, so the eye line right at this edge, you can actually hint at let's put an oval there, hinting at the ear. So it goes from the middle of the eye, that's the top of the ear, and the bottom of it lines up with just about the bottom of the nose. And notice that it doesn't go outside too much, otherwise the ears will be a little too big. And we have a couple of lines hinting at more volume in the back. And there we have it. Now this is lots of fun and lots of practice, that even if you're drawing a portrait like we're about to do next, which is this one. Oh, not that one. That's the layers of light that I want you to see as well when we get to shading. The exercise today will be to try to draw something like this, or looking at the image that you have on screen now, find these lines, simplify it, and from here we begin to then develop and add all the other smaller and more complex lines as we begin to see. And usually this is what throws us off. We begin to add details so early without really looking at a foundation. And do I mean you have to put all of these lines in there? No. But you're going to understand how you're seeing. And you see how I'm looking at the pose and it's almost identical. Very close. And that's why I chose this one. That you can begin to put together the qualities of line that will give you the likeness of the portrait. Now, I made my lines too heavy, but the general idea, what I mean, is to deconstruct this portrait the same way we just did with that image. Always starting with the sharp pencil, and here we go. One more egg. Now I should mention, I want you to pace yourself. You should not be, if you don't feel like I'm working too slow, take your time. I'm recording a video. You'll have a link for the video so you can do these over at your own pace. But working loosely doesn't mean working fast. What I want you to do is pace yourself and really feel comfortable with the grip, with the quality of the lines that you're drawing. So this is very close to a profile. It's called a 3/4 portrait. I'm going to start with, once again, the circle. And I want to make this a little lighter so it's neater. So you may not see it as clear as I do, but it's there. That's my size. And I'm getting a sense of the proportion of the size that I'm going to be working with, so I'm not too close to this edge and I don't run out of room over here in the back. So I got to make this a little smaller, and now I'm going to find the axis and the tilt. So I got to see that egg. I got to see the egg. And how do you do that? Sometimes squinting, simplifying the shape. But it is the best way. It is really the best way to start or practice something that you may have not done before, which is looking for simpler solutions. Oh, but I always draw my portraits and I start with the eyes and I finish the eyes and then I work from there. Yeah, I've done that too. And maybe you'll discover one thing that will make all of that easier. And then come up with your own recipe so you can do your own steps and have a more successful, more enjoyable drawing practice. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm going to get rid of that circle line, keep it neat, because what comes next is I'm going to try to measure that eye line. I know the center line, right very, very close to the edge. And I'm taking a look at that eye as well. So the left eye. And getting a good sense for the turn and the axis. So I feel it It's right there. Maybe a little bit less here at the bottom. And there's my axis line. Now I'm going to find that middle. Big one here. Have to trust it. And put in my eye line. Before you actually commit to the eye line, make sure you check it. Check if you're in the middle. Yep, there I am. I've learned the hard way to check it and check it and check it before you go further. I'm going to go ahead and split the bottom half, which is literally the face. All of the information of the face is right here. And as humans, we focus so much in the eyes and facial features that we simplify this so much, we give the face a bigger value than it actually has in terms of size and proportion. That's why we have mistakes, or generally we have a little more trouble with portraiture. It is one of the hardest things to master. So I'm finding the middle, and then I'm going to find the thirds here. Should give me the top. This looks more like the lower lip and the middle of the mouth there. So I'm making them really light. And if you recall, we were looking at, do you see the side of the face here? Now, I do see one very clearly, which goes almost from the side of the mouth, maybe even a little bit above. And it was that side line, remember? That gave me that cheekbone that goes almost straight up to the corner of the eye here, just a little past it, and it rounds. So notice that I simplify the lines. I'm not doing the whole thing. Giving you a little closer glimpse. Because what I want you to see is it's all there. What we were just doing here, it's all there, but simplified, lighter. So you can construct the pieces just a little bit simpler. And begin to see that, okay, the eyes are going to line up right here, giving me that eyebrow line. And I could split it maybe into two separate lines as I see them here. And just very lightly begin to ghost them in. Let's go ahead and add. This is going to be interesting because I have the edge and I see the whole bottom. And I can split it into almost a cube where I see the bottom and a tiny bit of the other side of the bottom. But it also has a sort of an axis. And then I want to see the front. So I see a little bit of a front and then the top side. And I'm just hinting at it, not drawing any details yet. So if I were to begin to add a little bit of value and light to this, you would immediately see that, oh, look, he's working with the nose and he's got it. But just generally getting the size and splitting it into smaller, simpler volumes. There's a bit of I call it the keystone, which is that part that's not forehead. And remember, we did a area for the forehead. You can actually see it here. And that's going to give me a little bit of where the hairline belongs. And you can actually deal with a couple of lines, hinting at what's going to happen here with hair. But the one thing that I'm trying to emphasize is never go beyond where you're supposed to be in terms of getting ahead of the next line, simplifying it pretty much the whole way through. Your portrait should come together without you forcing it. It just kind of comes alive. So I'm saying some of these lines. There's a big gap space. This is going to be a little bit off. And I want to see the line, the curvature. So I'm looking at it from a little bit from eye level, but there's a nice, interesting curve to the mouth where I'm just going to split it into smaller circles. Two at the top. Can you see them there? One is a little bit bigger than the other because in reality, one is closer to me than the other. So the one that's closer to me looks a little bit bigger. The one that's a little further away, it's a little bit smaller. Just like we'll deal with the eyes as well. And then the bottom one, I'm just going to do one big oval here. I will have a class in the future that is going to break down how to draw an eye, how to draw a nose, and how to draw a mouth, just like I'm doing here. And there's very simple steps, just like we're doing now. Notice that I'm just adding a couple of ovals, and it's almost capturing the expression, the volume of it. And I haven't even dealt with the light yet. So I see a little round. Remember that circle we did where we saw all the muscles of the mouth? Did I actually add the one for the chin? No, I haven't been there yet. So let's go ahead and see it, simplify it, and then ghost it in. So from here, I'm going to go straight into the jawline. And remember I mentioned the jawline usually is one of those make or break. And sometimes it just comes down to the angle. It's not even a curve. You just capture the angle and the dimension, and then slowly round it, letting it come together. Here's the cheekbone. And this ear, it lines up a little bit different because she's looking upwards. So I'm going to continue that eye line, and my ear, which should be right about here, and right through this line at the bottom and edge of this, just adding a little oval or semicircle here, just to hint at it. You could see how we see an edge of line that would hint at the neck. I'm just gonna hint, ghost it in just a little bit for pose. And now we're going to get into the area of complexity. So biggest, simplest, lightest, and we get a little more, a little smaller, a little more complex. And you should try as hard as possible to keep it simple as long as you can. So here, instead of getting small and tight as you were finishing this area, just simplify, see the volume, see the line. So I'm looking at the whole side of the nose before I do anything else to it. I'm going to see this area, and I'm going to see just about the size of it. And I know it looks a little bit off, but I'm drawing the eyeball first. Very small. I'm sorry, very light. I want to ghost it in just to see if I have the size. And from there, I'm going to show you the steps. So here's what I have so far. And you can see how this is going to come together, and it's going to come together really well. As soon as we begin, and you should be following steps without getting too far ahead. I don't want to draw anything that I would consider detail unless it's in the proper timing and in the proper place. So when is that? Let's readjust, so reevaluate some of these lines that I'm beginning to see as eyebrow. I'm going to add a little bit to the side of the face here where we see the difference between skin and hair. And I'm going to go ahead and close it out on this area here. Just as a big volume. Notice that I added a few lines, not specific, intentional, descriptive type of line for hair. Just a little bit of volume. And all of that is going to make every step from here a little bit easier to recognize whether I am on the right track. Another thing I should mention, you should be working your way through pencils if you have them, from HB to 2B, from 2B to 4B, and then moving a progression as they get a little bit darker as well. So I'm still working with the 2B, and I most likely will go through it all the way. Where do I go next? So I want to develop, I'm tempted, very tempted to develop the eyes a little bit more. And what I mean by that is some of these lines that go from the nose into the, and what I'm thinking about is shapes. So now I'm slowing down, I'm darkening, which means I'm kind of confirming what I see in terms of shape. And what I'm doing is just the curvature, no detail, just the shape of this eyebrow here. Yeah, it looks a little darker. And sometimes that could look as, oh, he did it, he finished it. Well, no, I just added a couple of extra lines that were a little bit darker in the direction and the shape that I see. And I could actually begin to add a little bit of that curve at the edge that rounds into the top. And still deconstructing smaller pieces. I'm not drawing an eye. I'm just drawing, in this case, I'm drawing a little semicircle that looks almost like a crescent moon that happens to be, I don't want to say the word, but the upper eyelid. So all I'm thinking about is a shape that looks like this, that has a little curve going in this direction, that then connects with a little banana or crescent moon or whatever that is this size in this direction with this axis. And piece by piece, if they begin to look like they are in the proper place, and remember I set myself up with those circles, instead of you trying to draw an eye, which is impossible, you got to realize that you're just drawing lines and shapes. So you identify and simplify those shapes and do one at a time. So your mind and your focus can handle it. So from here, I'm going to move into these shapes. Sometimes shapes become difficult to read because we read them a little more as lines. And, well, that's the side of the nose. So we think we know what they look like, and we make up the information. What I want you to do is stay away from that. Stay away from that. Try to realize that you are just looking at one piece at a time. In this case, the angle and the overall size of this darker area happens to be called an eye, an eyebrow. Now, what I wanted to do today is not take this portrait. I know it's going to be difficult to take it all the way through, but I did want to develop some of this line work and show you that not everything has to be a line. So I'm going to do a little bit of work here, and you'll follow me with this. Now, there's a couple of, you notice here, I have the bottom, I have the front, and I have the side. Instead of me adding lines, what I want to do here is add shade value. So this is definitely darker than this, and this is a little bit darker than the side as well. And it also has a shape, believe it or not. There's a little darker area here. And the temptation is going to be to begin to round it and shape it and mold it. But if you just add a little bit of, notice that I just kind of colored it in with darker, medium, and light. I haven't even touched this. And you begin to, well, I could actually finish it by adding a little extra dark right here in sort of an oval shape. And boom, it just comes together. I think that's what I'm trying to really the idea that I'm trying to put out is you don't have to draw. You just combine what you see from simple shapes and then see which one is darker, lighter. So I'm doing the same thing here. Those original ovals that I had, I'm saying that there's a little darker at the bottom, a little lighter at the top. And I'm just filling it in. And they come to an end right at this edge here. And here we have, so the thing is you have to look closely and avoid all the little tiny complex shapes and lines that are not supposed to be here at all. So I'm talking about these cracks and crevices of dark and light that are popping up. Just simplify it. A little darker right at the edge of the bottom. A little round towards the upper end. And then maybe just a little lighter than the upper lip. And that's it. If you begin to do all the little details, first of all, you're doing them out of place. So we're not supposed to be dealing with that right now. You do that at the very, very, very end, and you do it as finishing touches. Now here we have something where I have the side of the face. So it is a line. And this is something that's really tricky for portraits because we try to draw it as an edge, a line that really doesn't exist because it's a three-dimensional shape. But when we look at it as a two-dimensional, obviously it becomes an edge. So trying to capture these edges as lines is what makes portraiture a little bit tricky. And you see masters that have done amazing thing with this. They don't draw a sharp line. It's pretty much adding a little bit of darker value and then the contrast on the other side of it, which then becomes, in this case, hair or background. Now, some of you may be well, I want to add those eyelashes. See, I'm avoiding all of that all the way through. And then realizing what is the essential information that you need to add and at which point. Now, there's a lot more light to deal with here. So right underneath, right on the side. And here you want to kind of slow down, but in some cases, you want to bring this light, or shadow in this case, from here and then through here. And look at what happens to this portrait right away. Now, there's a lot of technique that goes on in doing this properly, and I'm doing it way too fast. Way faster than you should. You develop this by areas small, and yes, you could fill up a general big area like this, but then you want to render it with care. Notice here at the bottom and under the jaw, it gets a little bit darker. So I'm not dealing with lines. The guides that I set up earlier are telling me where to make it darker, lighter, rounder, and little by little, they'll get smaller. Very nice, interesting nose happening here with a little more shadow on the other side. And don't forget, you can always bring in an eraser to draw light back in by lifting some of those pencil marks. And adding just that little extra definition. This is a Tombow Mono Zero. And I'm going to show you a little bit closer here. See if that zooms in. It's called a Tombow Mono Zero. And it's kind of like a pen with a very tiny tip. It is an eraser. And you could just, kind of like a mechanical pencil, you see how the eraser comes out and it goes longer, or you could just push it all the way back in. You use it as a drawing tool. And it gives you a little more precision when you want to draw more specific and more realistic aspects of light. So here we are, going back to adding a little more, and I'm going to go ahead and finish this eye. So all the variations of light and shadow, lighter and darker gradations, that's what makes all the difference. Did I set up my lines with care? Are they in the right position? Do they look like my subject? Did I capture the likeness? And again, it's about simplifying the shapes. Obviously, a little knowledge of anatomy and knowing what overlaps and why it curves and how, in this case, for example, how thick this skin should be, and seeing how the light plays with it. That, I think, is the area of study where you bring portraits to the next level. So this is in the other side, it's darker. This upper eyelid is on this side, is darker because the light is coming from this direction. So here we're in the shadows, here we're in the shadows, here we're in the light. So managing your light and shadows, that's the secret. All of it is lines, shapes. The better you control those lines and shapes, starting with the grip, the easier you're going to get there. And then your focus should be 100% on how the light is working. What is light? What is shadow? And how do I get the best? How do I apply the best technique to capture those changes? Now, if I bring in I've been working with 2B. If I switch over to a 4B, that's just two steps up in blackness. Notice how easy, just a quick touch. So it should get smaller, more refined. And what do I mean by that? As we move forward in the progression of building up our drawing, we started with big, simple, and light. Now it's getting to smaller, more complex lines and shapes, and also darker. But the pencil's darker. My pressure and how hard I'm pressing the pencil, it's the same, which is very light with the same grip. All I'm doing is just going over areas with the darker pencil and creating more beautiful contrast. When you start with the lightest pencil, you want to make what the thing you want to make sure is you're laying down the foundation. So you want to use the lightest pencil that you can see and no one else can see. So if you're here and you're drawing at 3 feet from your paper, you could see the lines. That way you don't have to erase. Now that could be a 2H, a HB, or even a 2B. Some of us have such light touch with the pencil that we keep a 2B super light and we could work starting with the 2B. What you don't want to do is do the work over and then go over, basically wasting work. So doing work over a previous pencil. What you want to do is, I call it scaffolding, which is what we kind of did today, kind of scaffolding it and setting up for easier, smaller, and at the same time, as they get darker, touches of pencil, where you could just like I'm doing here, just with 1, 2, 3 strokes, kind of come to a completion because everything else is already working for me because we set it up.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. And that's, it takes a little bit of practice. And it takes understanding your strategy and your method of work. So I know that I'm heavy-handed and I need to be patient and work a little bit lighter, a little bit slower, a little bit longer. And that's usually why I hold on to lighter pencils like the 2H for a lot longer. Deconstructing, simplifying, and patiently working our way through a portrait. I hope you guys enjoyed it.